Good. We're rolling. Awesome. All right, let's get going. Some people might trickle in, but I'll be fine. All right, so this is Classroom Games. My name is Jamie, and I'm super excited to play some games with you guys. We'll play at least one, although with a group this size, we might have time for some more. We'll see. So before we dive into games, my hope is that we're going to talk about classroom games, what you can do with them, how to help educators by making one that works for their classroom, or if you're a teacher, how to find good ones that will actually work. Before we dive into that though, who am I? And I thought, what better way than a picture of Ghostbusters in Middle Earth? Everyone else has been doing their About Me slide with all their indie awards. This is mine. These are my awards. So this bottom one is me and my good friend Hannah, who went to Boston University with me. She was fellow history and ed major. And we both really like doing creative projects, including but not limited to making Ghostbusters outfits and funny faces. I love working with my friends and colleagues on stuff, and so I want to make it really clear right now that by no means am I a prolific classroom game creator. A lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about today is stuff that I have shamelessly stolen from my friends and colleagues and adapted or worked with them on, and that's really what I found is the best way to find a good classroom game is talking to other people. I'm sure you guys know that from making various games yourselves. This over here is from the inside of Adventure Pub, our caterers for today. And this was taken a week before heading back to school. I work at a public high school, Newton North High School. Is anyone? Do I have grads here? No? Okay, that would be terrifying. I've been running into a lot of them lately. They're like, I'm an alum. So this is a week before I had to brush off my syllabus for 9th and 10th grade world history, which is what I teach there. And my good friend Athena called me up and said, hey, I'm opening a board game pub. Do you want to do some wall decor? And I said, absolutely. So whipped up some fun maps. And now this is the go-to hang, which is for a lot of reasons. One, I love to bring people there and then show off my great tracing skills and say, look at that, I traced it from a projector. Also, though, we get to go and hang out and play games, which has always been something I've loved, both board games and physical games, or D&D, or getting up on its feet with LARP, which we heard some cool talks about earlier, loved it. And taking that love of games and bringing it into the classroom felt really organic for me. Initially because I just wanted my classroom to have that same fun vibe that places like Adventure Pub have. It's a place where I felt comfortable and welcome and excited, and I wanted my kids to feel that way when they came in my room. But after a few years of teaching, I found that games offered a unique teaching opportunity in some cases, and I wanted to take advantage of that. And so that's the part that I'm really going to talk about today is what are things that games do that other teaching tools don't access in the same way. Now, I've told you some weird facts about me. You've seen me in some strange pictures. So now you have to tell me about you. I'm going to tell you something that no high school teacher says, which is take out your phones, guys. Or your laptops. A number of you are already on them. So whatever you want. And you're going to go to a site called Socratic. And you're going to pretend to be a student. You're already in the seats. It works. And it's going to ask you for a room number. It's right there. Ball 179. And there should be a question for you. There will be a couple more. Did it? Socratic.com.
Oh, I dropped the E.
Oh, there it is. I don't know what the other weird sites are that are possible here. But now I'm worried. Yeah, it should look like this. You want to make it older. Yeah, oh yeah. Okay, click on that student login.
Oh, that was like a graceful.
And my first question, you might have multiple answers to this. I'm asking, what hat are you wearing right now for this talk? Maybe you're an educator and a game designer and a student. What hat are you wearing right now in terms of what you're hoping to walk away with? Are most people in?
Help.
All right. I'm going to pop over here and see how many of you guys are happening. Oh, look at all my students in here. We got 14 of you. I love it. All right. How we do? Oh, we get a cool mix here. All right, so we've got a couple educators, a couple game creators, game enthusiasts, me too, a couple students. Nice. No one's in the wrong room, so glad to hear that. Well, let's try another one. All right, what are you looking to do? I'm personally F, but...
Wow, you have the best people.
the best one.
Position if you're F.
Yeah.
In their room.
I know.
Are you?
You ready? I understand. The VR panel looks really cool, guys. I won't be insulted. Put these options here for a reason. Nine of my students. A few more. We're really trying to figure out if we're keeping our seat warm for that VR game. You can keep answering. Where are we going? Oh, someone's here to do something else entirely different. What? I'm curious. All right, learn a new game for my own classroom. Awesome. Hear from an educator what games suit their classroom. Will do. Learn specific games I can use. We'll do a couple of those. Learn general tips for how to run classroom games. That's actually what we're going to start with, so nice. All right. Told you to sit close. Get a turn, talk, say hi to somebody. Find a game you both like, and that's your short answer. Dark Souls. There you go. Alright. We got some masochists in here. Ooh, a lot of Dark Souls in here.
Whoa, Are there going to be more Dark Souls? It's going to be like Dark Souls.
That would be fun.
Hurt me plenty. What is this group of people?
Nice.
I don't think I have not heard of it.
Ooh, I do love that game. It's a good one. Undertale. Alright, take 30 seconds to put your game in if you have it, and then I'm going to move on to the next one. We got one more question.
Oh my god. This is what it is.
Total War. Alright, we're going to go to the last one. Oh, it's some Mass Effect in there. There we go. Alright, so we got Mass Effect, Total War, Undertale. You guys have a good mix here. And the Dark Souls, you crazy people. Alright, last one's true or false.
No.
This quiz is a game. True or false?
Oh, I see where you're going. Are you adopted system?
I know, now everyone's like, it's a quiz? No.
Wait,
There's
what
like,
you created?
There's a question? Absolutely. There will be a test at the end. I told you, public school teacher. No, there won't, guys.
What if you disagree with both options?
Wow.
We'll get there, Don't you worry. Only 10? Oh, we're too scared? Alright, let's see. What do you guys say? Ah, interesting. Alright, so most of you guys said yes. A couple of us said no. I put this question in here mostly to talk about the difficulty of defining what a game is, especially in a classroom. When I asked some of my colleagues before going and putting this slideshow together, I said, what are some classroom games that you use? And people had a variety of answers and then started debating, well, is that a game? Is that a quiz? Is that a survey? I don't know. Is that an activity? What defines a game? And so as I talked to lots of people, I started trying to categorize the types of games that they were telling me were in their classroom and that I know I use in my classroom too. And where I see Socratic and things like Kahoot, which you'll be well versed in if you've been in a classroom, kids are obsessed with it, are what usually get used as things like review games where you can go through, answer questions, see if you know, or potentially use them as preview. I use them as pre-quiz games to talk about what are we coming in with, do we know if Africa is a country or a continent? It's always sad when they give that answer, but those work as a kind of game. Kind of depends on how you use it. The other games I saw was a lot of things that I would categorize as informational games. Chronology, which I'm showing right here, is one of those examples. It's a game where while you're playing it, you're learning some rote facts. Chronology teaches you a lot about, surprise, surprise, chronology. You learn what year things happened, like when was mayonnaise invented? And weirdly enough, my kids love this game. We pull it out before a vacation and they're like, yes, I want to build a timeline. I'm like, you do know what you're doing, right? It's kind of the peanut butter around the pill you give your dog, right? They're so pumped for the peanut butter, they don't realize they're taking medicine. And so info games are great for that. Application games are pretty similar, right? Things where they get to play out math. Euclid, the game is awesome. You draw a bunch of geometric shapes and you get so into it that you forget you're learning about how geometry works. And so application and info games are kind of the hide what you're actually learning games. And then there's an entirely different category called gamification, which I don't do, though I would love to do. I talked to one of the science teachers at my school who has entirely gamified his classroom, meaning that you can level up by taking a quiz. If you failed that level, go ahead, try it again, just like you do in a game. You can get points for things that you do and go on side quests. And it's a really fun way to design a classroom, a really hard way to design a history classroom though. So I don't have a lot of practice on this, though I do own a lot of books about it. So if you want some titles, I'm happy to give them to you. And then the last type of game is what I would refer to as a just for fun game. And I think a lot of people put these down as not being relevant to the classroom, and the truth is they have a huge purpose in the classroom. Having games that are just fun with no educational value are still really important. They can help build your community, make your classroom feel welcoming, and teach a lot of soft skills like cooperation. So all of these games are really helpful in the classroom, and I use almost all of them, and I'm gonna talk about none of them, because even though they're really cool, I find that these are the games that are a little bit easier to approach as an educator, and I have an hour to hang out with you guys, and I want to play a game. So I decided to talk about a very specific category of game, which I'm calling experiential game, or LARP light for the classroom. I spent a little while trying to figure out how to define this, and I went with a game designed to simulate and contextualize a real experience through reasonable decision making, and that last part is really important, and we'll talk about why. And any sort of experiential game is really going to be about the process of the game, not the product that they create. And I'm going to talk about these games because they are particularly helpful to me as a history teacher, and I think they can be helpful across a lot of other curriculum too. And they're one of the types of games that were something unique games could bring to my classroom that no other teaching tools were able to do. And the big thing that I use experiential games to do is build empathy, which is really hard to do in a lecture. So empathy and understanding how people come to the decisions that they come to and why they do that and what motivates them is enormously helpful in life. But when you're trying to explain to people how does Nazi Germany happen, it's nice for them to actually understand the logical decision-making process that brought people to that point. Because if they can empathize with it, then they can start to recognize it and see it and unpack a lot of complex concepts. And that's the other thing that I really like about experiential games is that I think they break down otherwise really complicated things like capitalism and communism into really base ideas. And so we'll take a look at that. Now, this would be a really lame talk if I talked all about teaching with experiential games and didn't let you experience one. So we're gonna try one. And how many people do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Perfect. I'm gonna add some paper to this hat. It's gonna be a bit of a danger game because I don't know what's on all of these, but that's okay. 1, 2, 3. All right. While I'm explaining this game, you're all gonna take a piece of paper in this hat, and the only thing you need to know is don't look at it. Keep it in your hand. All right. This is a game called Thin Red Line. My lovely friend Hannah, who was being a good Ghostbuster with me, showed me this game, and I think she got it from some colleague who got it from some colleague. Like I said, shameless stealing, that's all we do.
Shameless collaboration.
Yes, it's a good way to frame it. So, this game is simple. There's 2 conditions. 1, you're all gonna receive a piece of paper. On that paper is a red or black line. In total, somewhere in this room, there's between 2 and 6 red lines. There's between 2 and 3 because there's not that many of you. I took some out, don't worry. Your objective is going to depend on what's on your paper. If you got a black line, your goal is to make a group of people, make a little clique, with as many as you can, but no red lines. If there's a red line in your group, you lose. If you're a red line, your goal is to make that hard. So, if you're a red line, your goal is to infiltrate a group. The bigger the better, but choose as you will. There's only one rule to this game. You cannot show your paper to anyone. That is key. The only way that you get to prove that you are a black line is through your words, through your body language, your facial expressions, or, whatever else you feel like doing. So, take a moment, look at your piece of paper in private, keep it nice and secret. It's all the way at the end. I rolled them all up. And then I'm going to give us a small group. Let's take 4 minutes. You're going to want to all get up, chat, form some groups.
Alright, so what's the strategy?
And I want to see if you can build a bigger group than my class did.
Biggest group over here.
No.
Who wants to do it with us? Who wants to do it with us? Where's that group here? Look at this. We have an official. I love it. My favorite friend stuff is brain juice.
Well, there's like 3 people.
Yeah.
And we should learn territory.
Yeah. Wait, what's the weird?
Hey guys, we're a big group. Come join us. We're cool
Yeah.
and sexy.
No,
Only black lines come here.
So
But we're sexy anyway. I don't know if I think they're not a group yet. I think they're just like. You know, you want to join us with sexy brown people in our group. I mean, here's the thing. The smaller the group, the more likely to self-identify. I want people to be the biggest group possible. But if it's just me, and someone
Oh, are you splitting away?
Wait,
Is it now 2 and 3?
Wait, I'm just like,
You can disperse.
So if you're a group of 2 and you're both black lines, then this group of 2 and that group of 2.
Alright, you're halfway done. 2 minutes. Finalize those groups.
Yeah, well, if we trust each other, we're running together. They don't want it. They don't want something else.
actually, that's fine. Wait, I want to learn.
Wait, come join us. Come join us.
Yeah, if you give it to them, then we'll have
Okay, so who wants to be in a small group? Small group? Small group.
So the biggest group surviving wins.
Because we want to be in a small group, we recently assumed that we're black.
We are sad over there.
So now let's go join the group. So now let's go join this group. Since we voted to a small group. That's also a possibility.
So we have like 2, 4, 5. One of us is easy self attack. If they fail, we're done.
Yes, or if 2 small groups that are really.
Actually, no, if everyone is individual, technically the red lines will also be the biggest. Because like the objective for black lines is just
Alright, 1 minute left. Finalize the groups.
but
Are we ever
We're good, thank
You are?
you.
In that case, if you're happy where you are, that means that we trust you more. If you want to join us, you can join us.
I'm sad. Oh yeah, that's why I got two. Wait, no, I heard that. Wait, I voluntarily
That was when I think we just lost our red line because someone just ditched when you folks.
For the larger group.
that's how mechanics work. Quick,
So are you folks? Are you?
Let me see, how many minutes do you have?
I trust
Like,
this group.
you've got
Are you
like
folks
30
ready?
seconds.
All right,
I'll
I'll
do
do
that.
this board of small groups here.
Except that you guys want to be in your own right.
Okay, so now I'm gonna be over here.
Right.
And just statistically speaking, if you're making full grade, then now there's red line.
Right, people joined the larger group because they were red lines.
I'm giving you
Are jumping
10 seconds
I trust you.
to finalize your
It's
group.
an attack.
Figure out where you are.
Black groups immediately lose if they have a red line, no matter how
You
precise.
immediately lose if you have a red line.
They were
5,
bigger. They were bigger than
4, 3, 1. All right, so we end up with 3 groups?
Yeah.
Impressive. Okay.
Should
How
we
do you
try
guys
colors?
feel?
I feel like I'm going for a safe. I'm being a safe bet.
All right, so if you have a red line, raise your hand now.
Yep, secret rules games.
So our biggest group was you guys at 4. Wow, that's pretty sad. So my class beat you. My class has gotten a group of 5 before. You guys split up into pretty small groups. All right, you can go and sit and get comfortable. We're gonna talk about it.
Can I take a second?
I'm foreign.
I love that you have an interview process. All right, grab a seat, grab a seat. So, I want to ask you guys a couple of questions about the game we just played. And I'm going to start with the first question because the end of that experience got a little frenetic.
No, it was.
How is everyone feeling?
Great.
Yeah, how you feeling?
May I do 2-minute talk?
Sure.
Or one. I play hidden role games at work with a group of people that very much know each other. So this was essentially a hidden role game.
Yeah.
But the thing is, no one knew each other, and there were also the only mechanic was just like you win or lose based on this.
Yeah.
So it was so much more fun because I could put myself as the mechanic. See, like if I move, what do other people do? So I like that a lot better than like the traditional like werewolf or like resistance or something.
Gotcha.
That's cool.
Is it, who does anyone feel stressed right now?
No, great.
I feel
No,
bad
impressive.
because I had to
Yeah.
had to tell people no, you're not in my group yet.
Yeah, you guys got
We
intense
got
up
very
there.
tyrannical about our interview process. We were like, I'm sorry, no, you have to pass the questions.
When did you feel safe during that?
During the game.
When you were a red player.
When you were a red player, you felt safe the whole time. When did you feel safe?
When Ms. Murphy had the idea of the interview process.
Why'd that make you feel better?
Because so I used to be a lawyer,
Yeah.
and I know that you can't tell. Like I don't think anybody can tell whether someone's lying just by looking at them.
Ah.
But as soon as there was a process, I felt like I can trust the process.
Okay. So you didn't feel like you could trust a person, but you could trust a process, yeah?
I was much more interested in seeing the story of how it was going to turn out
Ah.
than necessarily the mechanics. So I was super relaxed. I was just like, at any point we could just call time, and I'd be cool to see what happens.
Okay, what about you?
I feel like maybe it's just in this scenario, but I feel like it's very easy to tell who redliners are because they're always gonna.
So that was my next question: is how did you guess if someone was a red or black line? What was
They
your
either want you to come to their group, or they'll go to your group, or they'll be very talkative. There was no in between. Someone was one of those. Very talkative. You were very.
He wasn't that talkative.
Okay, so you based it
He
on
wasn't, but.
maybe talkative, how friendly they were?
Yeah, but if you're moving along and you're trying to move to another group and stuff like that, like you're definitely a redliner.
Okay. Movement, what did you think?
Yeah, I've kind of the same thing. Like black line people have a reason to be xenophobic.
Yep.
So you trusted the xenophobia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, feels uncomfortable. All right. Was anyone wrongfully accused of being a red line? No one. No one was wrongfully accused. You guys kicked some people out.
We just didn't accept the
They
man.
were selected.
All right, that's a nice way of putting it.
I still felt rejected.
Were you a black line?
So I didn't look at my paper.
You didn't look at it at all? Interesting. So how are you trying to defend yourself then?
I just assume I'm a black line because then I can feel more truthful about it. And then if I am a red line, I'm doing my job.
Interesting.
Wow.
Wow, that was I've never seen that strategy before, but I like it.
Schrodinger's line.
Schrodinger's line indeed. All right. Why was making large groups difficult? This is a question I ask my kids.
It wasn't my goal.
Okay, it wasn't your goal.
Because it was my goal, but the thing is that it's because of numbers.
Yeah, you ended up in a group of 3. That was the smallest group.
Yeah, it won. But it
Well,
did
no, the
not
group
win.
of 4.
Yeah. It passed one, but not the other. Because you get too unsure of who's there. So it's just like.
So the bigger the group, the more dangerous it was. Okay. What would we need to solve this problem? Yeah.
I came up with a solution, but it also depends on how you interpret the rules of the game, because if you define largest to mean largest in the context of the game, like in the context of one instance of the game, not really comparing yourselves to others who play the game, then if literally everyone stands as individuals, everyone is in the largest group, and everyone meets all of their stated criteria.
I love talking with game developers. Oh man, this is not at all what my kids say. What was your thought?
It was similar to that. It's just I think, everyone who says they're red gets in one group, and all the black people stay as individuals, and you have the same thing.
Okay, you guys are thinking so both in and out of the box. How could we solve this? There's a pretty easy answer here.
Change the questions.
I'm gonna ask my lawyer up here.
Yeah, we're starting from the assumption that red is bad.
Oh, you're getting deep in here. We're gonna get there. We're gonna go there. Hold on. How would we solve it? What?
That was kind of where I was going with this. Why do we care?
Yeah, change the
Why
questions.
do we care?
We're gonna get there.
Colorblind.
There's a. Oh my gosh, you guys are overthinking it so much. How do we solve this problem?
Solve it by finding out who's a red line person.
Yeah, you see the piece of paper, right? That's the solution. If we could all see each other's papers, we'd be fine. You guys are going over here, doing your game theory at me. Good God. All right. If I lied and there were no red lines, would you guys have played that game
Oh,
differently?
that would have been so good.
Oh.
Yeah.
Or if we were all.
No.
Oh.
I assumed those.
No, because we would have.
You were thinking that might have happened.
Yeah, we would have
So-
figured. We would have.
These are debrief questions that I ask sometimes, but not all of them, because these all are doing different things. And so I'm going to give you the behind the scenes of what these questions do. In my class, I'm always going to start off with how's everyone feeling, which is just a basic debrief question to get everyone a sense of how are we doing, what's going on, what was your experience. Always start with a softball. It's nice and easy, it gets people talking. The second question, though, was to make you guys start thinking about what weird things and illogical things did you do in any state of uncertainty or fear, though you guys were so laid back. I've seen almost fistfights break out during this game. And so, how does that change your decision making, right? You guys got a little tyrannical. You guys got very skittish, right? Some of you guys were just like, let the world come at me, but we all had different means of judging people. How much were they talking? Did they look funny? Did they laugh at the wrong moment? I've seen, again, fights break out over a giggle. They're like, you giggled! Red line, get out! I saw a group of guys all did a push-up contest. If you could do 10 push-ups, you were a black line. Completely illogical, but they decided that was the rule. The third question, which didn't happen here, is to get at some degree of empathy for why is it difficult to prove your innocence in a state of paranoia. You guys went less for accusing each other and more for just viewing yourselves, which is, again, a little unusual, but I liked it. And so you can end your conversation here. You don't need to do the rest of the debrief questions. If you just want to talk about fear, paranoia, and uncertainty and how it impacts decision-making, maybe talking about current events, maybe talking about a novel you're reading, whatever's happening in your classroom, This is where you pause and you kind of shift to your classroom activity, whether it's debrief as a group or write a paragraph or reflect. They now kind of have that sensation and feeling of like, oh man, I did get kind of weird in that moment. We did start making interview questions about your lines. That was strange. That was uncomfortable, right? The rest of the questions are more specific. So I asked number 4 when I'm teaching about totalitarian regimes, weirdly enough. Because my students always get frustrated with this idea of, how come no one stopped Stalin? Like, what was that about? Weren't they all unhappy? What about Hitler? I know some people were down for him, but generally wasn't everyone aware that he was a bad dude? And I say, large-scale organization is really hard with secret police. Because the whole point is not necessarily their prolific nature, but their prolific psychological nature. It's really hard to make big, wide-scale resistance, because the bigger you get, the more dangerous it is. And you felt that, right? The biggest group you guys made was 4. You're not gonna fight Nazis with 4 people, come on guys, right? And so you started to get really freaked out. The more people were there, as much as you wanted to build a big group, that was your goal, was to build a large group, you still couldn't do it. And so I use this to try to help them solve that conundrum when we learn about this of, but why couldn't they do it? If they had just wanted to resist, why didn't they resist? And sometimes the answer is they did and they failed, and sometimes the answer is they wanted to and they didn't have the means to, both from real warfare and psychological warfare. This question I use when kids try to ask me how did Hitler get elected, and I tell them Hitler said he could find the red lines, right? He said, I know who all the communists are, and they never really get that point. They're like, well, that's dumb. Until they've been in a state of going, who are the red lines, right? And then they're like, yeah, if someone said they could tell me who all the red lines were, I'd elect them to government. Go for it. Take charge. And so I say, that's what Hitler said he could do. People liked that idea. People were excited because he could take away the uncertainty. He could take away the fear. I love that you guys, though, went for a total game breakdown of rules for that instead. The last question is great for teaching a bunch of things. I bet you can guess some of them.
Yeah.
Like what? Was this last question good for teaching?
Discrimination.
Discrimination, definitely. Racism. Also big events like the Red Scare, Salem witch trials, right? Were there really a ton of communists? No. Were there really witches? I wish, right? But the truth is, that game plays out entirely the same. So a really fun way to play this in the way that Hannah plays it sometimes in her US class is she does the exact game that I did, except this hat is all black lines. And she plays it, and they all rip each other to shreds, and they freak out, and they can't build a big group, and they all turn on each other. And she says, raise your hand if you have a red line, and no one raises their hand. And then she goes, Red Scare! And that's it. They get it, right? And so I wanted to go through at least one of those with you because the important part of a good classroom game is the game and making sure it works and it fits. But also it's the debrief questions. Knowing how to debrief a game is so essential to it actually making an impact in your classroom. I could have chosen a whole bunch of different questions from this, and depending on which question I choose, this game takes on a totally different meaning. It can be about secret police, it can be about power and persuasion, it can be about discrimination and racism, it can be about witches. So what you do after the game really matters, and I think a lot of people take that for granted. And they get so excited about the game, they'll let it run for the whole class, and expect that the experience is going to speak for itself. And maybe an amazing game will do that, but generally speaking, your job as an educator is to help your students make sense of the experience that they had and lead them through with those questions. So a good game starts with knowing what questions are you going to ask and what do you want them to pull out from it. I love this game because you can do tons of different stuff with it. Now, the games themselves are fun, and the debrief questions are key, but if you don't have a great game from your wonderful friend, where do you start? And I recently grappled with this when trying to make a game about my favorite period of time, the early Middle Ages, because it begs for a game. And so when I looked at this, I had to break down what were the steps to making a game, and doing that helped me reflect on what's important to do first. So like I said, I've run a lot of early Middle Ages games because it begs for a game. I mean, it's a period of time where a bunch of illiterate fools are running around plague-ridden Europe with broadswords. And if I can have my kids reenact that, by all means, we're doing it. But what I found was over the years, this game was very disingenuous. My kids were walking away from it thinking that everyone in Europe was an idiot, and an illogical idiot. And here's the thing. Sure, they were idiots, but they were very logical idiots, much like present day us, right? And I wanted them to understand that and not just laugh at the past, but get why it came to such a weird point. And so what I was struggling with was I initially had a theme, but not an objective. So this year when I redid this game, I made sure that the first thing I did was establish what is coming out of this game. Not, I want this game to be about knights, but I want my kids to understand the logical train of decision that led Europe to become feudal and manorial, aka illiterate knights running around with broadswords, right? So I said, that's what I want them to get out of it. And once you know what your objective is, the next thing to do is figure out what their objective is. When I played a capitalism game, their objective was make as much money as they could, obviously. With feudalism, it was pretty easy. Don't die was their objective. I knew that they weren't going to be able to succeed at that in every case, so I gave them 20 villagers so they could do a kind of trial and error of not dying. So their objective became don't die. My objective became understand the logic that led Europe to regress 1,000 years. And from there, the third thing was set the conditions that reflect your context. This is where you bring your expertise to a game. In my case, I'm a history teacher, and I knew all about early Middle Ages. The conditions of the time were bleak, right? No central government, no army, farming technology was very backwards and not nearly at the pace of everyone else in the world. We're dealing with constant invasions and plagues and earthquakes. And from all of this background knowledge, I established a few conditions that were going to reflect that for the kids. So I said, okay, in this game of your 20 villagers, you don't get any sort of defense. If you want to defend yourself, there's no army. You have to spend time and resources to train a warrior. Great. You all need to eat food, and it's going to take a lot of farming because you don't farm a lot of excess food. Great. And the third condition was I, at any point in time, can come and cause a random event to happen. Invasion, earthquake, plague, it's at my whims. So, once I had the conditions, the last thing I made was the rules. And I think a lot of times we start with the rules because the mechanics of a game are really fun and we're drawn to them. But the truth is, rules came last. And rules, all I was trying to do is make sure I reflected what someone in that time could logically choose to do. In this case, you guys got a chance to logically choose who to associate yourself and organize yourself with. For the early Middle Ages, I decided that the logical choice was what do you do with your day? But I spread it out to a month. They got to pick month by month what everyone in their village did for their day job, essentially. And the truth is, everyone farmed or fought. But they didn't know that, and I wanted them to get to that point. So I gave them a bunch of options. They could farm, they could go fish, they could go hunting and traveling and trading and crafting and all sorts of cool, prosperous sounding things. And that was their game. They got to pick what job they did, and they tried to stay alive based on their job choices. Let's take a look at what it ends up looking like. Being the amazing game designer that I am, I put this in the most exciting format called a spreadsheet. I know, amazing. We're gonna zoom in a little so that you can actually see what's happening here. There it is. Okay, so this is a real game that was played. I changed my kids' names just for their sake. But this was one of my groups that I had, and month one, they were feeling ambitious. They did all sorts of different jobs, right? They farmed, they fished, they traded and crafted, they started training some guards. They were feeling great. So I sent some Vikings to kill one of them, and the trader got killed by pirates. And they were like, okay, all right, we're all right, we can come back from this. So month two came along and they were still feeling ambitious. They sent more people out to trade. They died immediately because trade was very, very dangerous. And they didn't have enough people farming, and so a bunch of them also starved. 2 months in and they were down 7 villagers. They weren't feeling great. So month 3, they got really cautious. You can see all these numbers move to farming, right? They're basically all farming, and they're still trying to train these warriors. I made them take 3 months to train them because I'm mean. So they farmed, they were training, they got lucky, nothing occurred. The next month, they stayed boring. Look at the farming. Everyone's farming. One person's fishing to feed a warrior who's in training, everyone else is guarding. That's it, right? And because they did this well, Vikings attacked them, but they defended themselves. Month 5, nothing changes. They're all farming or guarding. That's it. Month 6 rolls around, I killed someone from the plague just to remind them that the early Middle Ages suck. But at the end of this game, they made manorialism. They made feudalism, and I did nothing except for set up the parameters by which they could live in the early Middle Ages. I asked them if they played the game again, what would they do? And they said, I would make everyone a farmer or a guard. I was like, that sounds super boring. They're like, no, that's the way to do it. That's the smart way, Miss Ball. And I went, you get it now, right? And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, you get why they all farmed and fought. They're like, oh crap, they were smart. So at the end of it, yes, they got to play a game and they were extremely excited, and I got to be a DM for 6 groups at once, which was pretty wild. And when I asked them how would you sustain that system, they said, well, it's very math-based, right? We need to have this many farmers to feed everyone and this many guards, so I guess you should just do whatever your parents did. That'll keep it even. And I was like, oh, good job, serfdom. Nice, love it. So this was a way to basically organically create feudalism, and it's still a ridiculous system, and it's still backwards, and it's still a bunch of illiterate dirt farmers, right? But there are logical illiterate dirt farmers, and that's the important thing, that they get, there's a reason people came to this point, and it's not just random. Now, making this game took a while, and I want to make it clear that all first games are a rough draft, which is a bunch of game creators you guys know. And so what I would do with games is playtest them a lot, sometimes in my classroom with my kids, sometimes with my friends at home, and improve them and repeat and keep trying to get them better. And there was a couple of metrics that I used to try to improve my games. And the thing that I'm still trying to improve about the feudalism game is it's too complicated. A good classroom game needs to be really simple. Recognize that that game, as simple as it was, choose a job, numbers show up, you either live or you die, took about 10 minutes to get them ready to play. And then took a good 35, 40 minutes to play. So the simpler the game, the easier it is to do in a classroom time and space. Something like this, where I hand out some paper and you all squabble for 5 minutes, is amazing. I much prefer a game that I play for capitalism involving nothing but a bag of Hershey Kisses and rock, paper, scissors. It's a really easy game. You give everyone a Hershey Kiss, you say, do you want more Hershey Kisses? You can compete for them. Play rock, paper, scissors. Winners takes a Hershey Kiss. Fun twist, a couple people in the audience have 10 Hershey Kisses. And they say, that's not fair, and I say, welcome to capitalism. A good game is also going to allow for reasonable decision making. Everyone should be able to make their own choices based on logic. You shouldn't try to force them into a specific path, otherwise it's not really experiential, right? You're just kind of having them play a role. And so with the capitalism game, I tell them there's 2 rules and everything else is on them. They will steal from each other, they will make trade unions, it's crazy. Some of them will abstain from playing. They're like, hell no, I have 1 piece of candy, I'm keeping this piece of candy. Kids love candy. So letting everyone make their own reasonable decisions is really key to a good experiential game, and making sure that all of the experiences that they might have are valid is also really helpful. In the capitalism game, it's perfect, because all sorts of different things are going to happen. Most of your kids are going to end up broke, right? They're going to play rock, paper, scissors, lose their 1 piece of candy, and then go, well, I'm done playing forever now, and sit down. A couple of them will get rich, though, right? Susie's going to start with 1 piece and end with 6. Rags to riches, it's real, it's perfect. Capitalism is a wonderful system, right? And that story has to happen to explain why capitalism catches on. Because if it wasn't for someone like Susie to put on a poster, no one would believe in it. And most of the rich are going to stay rich, but if someone who's rich ends up poor, that's real too, right? So all of the experiences should be valid. Some kids survived the Middle Ages really well. All of them lost a few people. Some of them TPK'd their town and everyone was dead. All real, right? And so if it's a good experiential game, they should be allowed to kind of break as many boundaries as possible within a small rule set and still have that be real. And the last thing, of course, is make sure you prep that debrief. The capitalism game could just end at, wow, capitalism, it's uneven. But a single debrief question makes this a really helpful experience. I ask them, okay, fine, a lot of you, most of you, are unhappy. How would you rewrite the rules to this game? And they say, well, first off, everyone needs to start with the same amount of candy. And I go, okay, fine. And they go, second off, we need to start with more candy because 1 piece is too dangerous. I don't have the ability to take risk like everyone else. So I say, fine. We recollect the candy and we redistribute to 2 peaches each. And I say, well, what's going to happen if we start the game again? Someone's going to end up rich and everyone else is going to end up poor. I guess we shouldn't play the game anymore. Hey, communism. Good job, right? And my favorite thing to do is there's a fun trick question you can do, which is while collecting all their candy, you say, can I have your candy back? Can I have your candy back? And by the time you get to the second row of kids, someone's grown wise. It's usually one of the rich ones. And you say, can I have your candy back? And they say, no. And you go, okay. And you keep going. And you get to the front of the room and you go, okay guys, let's play it again. But Susie has 11 pieces of candy. Well, she didn't want to give them to me. What do you want me to do? Kill her. Every time. Without a doubt. One kid in the class goes, kill her. If you want to motivate kids, guys, Hershey Kisses, I'm telling you, they'll do wild stuff for them. And I go, there's Marxism. Good job. You made that too. So a good debrief question can take a nice experiential game to a totally different level. Instead of just teaching capitalism, I get to teach 2 different types of communism at the same time. It's really good. Now, a couple of things to avoid. Has anyone ever played Jeopardy in their class in high school? Yeah, that. It's a terrible, horrifying experience. It's a very Lord of the Flies kind of situation, if you ask me, because everyone is so cutthroat about the points that they forget that they're reviewing for their test tomorrow, right? So games with too much competition can get tricky. The capitalism game, competition is part of the experience, and therefore it works within the realm of what you're doing. But putting in competition for competition's sake to up the engagement can really backfire, and I've found this happen a number of times. Kids get way more excited about beating another team than actually playing their game. And so unless you're going to use that as part of the experience, then back away from it is what I would advise. And the other thing, like I said, any sort of disingenuous or forced role-playing, sometimes this is hard to avoid, but once you start to tell your kids or your students what to do, then they're not really in charge of the decision-making, and that takeaway point of how someone gets to a logical decision doesn't really happen. So I do a World War I conference where they all play the different countries, and I try to give them as much freedom as possible, but I do require them to all follow at least one principle, or else they completely stop acting like France and Britain and start acting like Susie and Mark. So in those cases, you can kind of bend the lines, but overall, try to avoid it because it'll take away what you're actually trying to get out of this game. The third thing I would say is overly long games. I've seen a lot of games that people love that last many, many days, and while these are cool, to be honest, if you're designing a game for a classroom, we don't have time for it. We have really heavy, big curriculum that we are constantly crunched to fit in, and so if you design a really cool game for a classroom and you tell us it takes a week, we'll go, that's cool. Hope someone else has fun with that. If we can carve out a week, that would be amazing. We usually can't. And if a game takes a week, that's a week before you get to that debrief, right? If a game can be quick and you can pull out what's the important part of that experience faster, I find it generally works better. And the last really important note I want to make here is don't underestimate the social emotional impact of a game. And I don't think this group of people here would do that, but I do find that some people do. I saw a rash of Facebook posts recently about, oh, this genius kindergarten teacher who taught about discrimination by discriminating against the kids for a week. And I was like, whoa, that's a bad idea. That feels dangerous. And so games where you're going to simulate any sort of negative emotional impact are important. Don't get me wrong. Those are sometimes the things we want our kids to empathize with. What I would be very cautious of, though, is making sure that the game is the enemy and not each other. I have even seen kids walk away from that red line game with legitimately hurt feelings. And I've had to be really careful about how I frame it and how I debrief it to make sure that they don't actually fight with each other outside of the classroom over that game. So that game, which I think is pretty mellow, can have that impact on students. So keeping that in mind, be careful with how hard you go, especially if you're aiming your game at younger kids. Even older kids, right? A lot of us I know have gone to LARPs talking about bleed. It happens in even mild games. So be really cautious of that if you start to dig into tricky subjects like discrimination. All right. Last but not least, I thought it would be worthwhile, since a lot of you guys are game developers, to talk about what teachers might look for in a game that you might not know, rather than make a good game. You already know that. One thing is that a game needs to be easy to teach. Again, I think people really underestimate how hard it is to bring a game to a very mixed level of students. So things like Secret Hitler I brought to my class once, and I had to have the kids read the rules ahead of time because there was no way that they could read them, understand them, and play the game in the same class. So even giving them the rules ahead of time, a lot of kids struggled with it. And that's a pretty straightforward game for those of us who have played it. Who's played it? A bunch of us, right? Pretty simple in terms of games that you might have seen. For a classroom of kids, took a while. So games that are easy to teach and don't take long to teach are really key. Games that are short, most of us are teaching somewhere around an hour block of a class, some as short as 45 minutes. We usually have set up and take down time for our class, so games that are 30 minutes or less are kind of ideal. And something that I think is a bummer but true is that they have to be accessible to us. We were just talking about really cool VR games, and I would love it, but very low on my list of things to buy for my classroom is an Oculus Rift, right? Especially 30. So games that are accessible, things on the internet, things that are physical, things that kids can play on their phones. They're basically all coming in with a tiny computer, which is great. So stuff like that, and that doesn't run on any sort of heavy processing system, are awesome, and we love those. Games that involve 10 pieces of paper, even better. So there's just a limit in what we can access in the classroom. Most of us aren't going to be able to bring in a console of any sort. And so the more accessible it is to us and the more we can get to it, the more we're going to play it in our classroom. This one seems silly, but interactive I've found is key. I've found a lot of ed games that get advertised to me that are essentially a really pretty story. And while I love storytelling games, and I think they're their own kind of beautiful medium, we're already doing a lot of that in our classroom when it comes to lecture or readings. If we want to bring a game into our classroom, it's usually because we want our students to get more engaged and have something that they can do. So a game that kind of walks us through, for example, Viking Quest, kind of walks you through the story of Vikings, and they get to make some choices about the boat that they build, are okay, but they're really not approaching something too different than what we're already doing. And then just in general, keep ed applications in mind. You might not think that your game is for a classroom, but if your game is teaching anything about an emotional response or about cause and effect, or maybe there's some math based into your game or soft skills like cooperation that might be applicable to a classroom, advertise it to us, make it accessible to us, give it in a way that we can find and track down, because I'm a very game enthusiastic person, but most teachers are not necessarily spending their weekends going to a LARP, which is what I did all weekend. So if you can kind of keep us in mind and think about what ways could your game be educational and what might a teacher want to do with it, that's awesome. And we are always looking for ways to liven up our classroom, and games are a really cool way to do that. So I think I've left a total of like 2 minutes for questions. Are there any quick questions before I hand over my time to the wonderful VR that's